Welcome to Around the SEC, where we take a trip around the greatest conference in the nation, following the biggest storylines and making bold predictions. I'm Mikayla Kelly.
And I'm Micah Farmer. Today, we're discussing some pivotal moments from the weekend across the conference, picking our teams of the week and making predictions for this weekend's matchups. All this and more on Around the SEC.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Around the SEC. We've got a quick one for you guys today, but a fun one nonetheless. Many SEC teams were on a bye this past weekend, but that does not mean it was not a crazy weekend for the conference. And I'll start off with one of the biggest storylines from this weekend. Unfortunately for us who've been pulling for Mizzou's Cinderella story, the Tigers of the North are no longer undefeated, falling to the Tigers of the Bayou, LSU, 49-39. At first, Brady Cook and company came out cooking, if you will, leading the game until the fourth quarter when they gave up 22 points. What went wrong for Missouri, or rather, what went right for LSU in this Tiger battle?
Well, I think for both of those answers in the fourth quarter, you can say everything. Missouri had a disaster in the fourth quarter. Brady Cook threw his second interception of the game, which coming into the game, he had none on the year. So to throw two in one game is brutal for Missouri. And I think just LSU showed that their offense is good enough to, even if the defense doesn't play amazing, which they really didn't versus this Mizzou offense, but this offense is still good enough to win LSU games.
Right, like you said, despite throwing for 411 yards with 2 touchdowns, Brady Cook threw 2 interceptions, and turnovers in a game like this can be critical, and we kind of saw at the end that fumble, which definitely went right for LSU, kind of sealed the deal for them. And in terms of the defense, they cannot get pressure on Jaden Daniels. He absolutely carved up that defense. He's extremely fast, and they just couldn't adjust to it, and then end up being the downfall for Missouri, I think. Yeah,
just too much of an athlete for them to hang with this week. Staying on the topic of SEC East teams, the Georgia Bulldogs appear to have finally shown up for the season. They welcomed the undefeated Kentucky Wildcats to Athens this past Saturday and proceeded to destroy them 51-13. Do you think it's time to give the Bulldogs the #1 spot back after we've been saying all year that they might not deserve it?
Listen, I think that scare in Auburn shook them up a bit, but in a good way, and I'll take back what I said. As of now, they're the #1 team in the country. I think critics were wondering if they could really put away a competitive opponent. We said Kentucky is probably the most likely on their schedule this season to compete with them, and they absolutely did not. Athens handled them, and I think that's because Carson Beck has finally found his rhythm. That kid passed for 389 yards and put up 4 touchdowns, so now that he's finally clicked with this team, I don't see them really losing another game this season. So for that reason, I think they do deserve the #1 spot, and I'll swallow my pride and take back what I said this whole season. They got the quality win that I think they needed.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Beating that Kentucky team that emphatically at home is just, it's a very impressive win for the Bulldogs. And Brock Bowers again showing out 7 catches for 132 and a touchdown. It appears that no one is going to be able to stop him this year. And if no one can stop him, how do you stop Georgia? So I think I'm going to have to agree with you. I'm going to have to swallow my pride and put Georgia back at #1 as much as I might not want to do that.
Which things can change, but for right now, there was a lot of big losses this weekend. We saw Texas lose. They're getting knocked down a few pegs. Notre Dame lost. They're completely out of playoff contention.
Yeah, so that offense, despite Sam Hartman, has not been good.
Yeah, Sam Heisman, as I've been saying this
week,
threw some interceptions, and Notre Dame was done. I was without service all day on Saturday. Came back, looked at my phone, saw Notre Dame lost to Louisville, and I said, I'm done watching football for this season. But I also just want to give props to their offensive coordinator, Mike Bobo. I think he's taken a lot of heat, but he knew to make the adjustment to attack through the air, knowing that Kentucky has a top 5 run defense in the conference. So you have to give props there. And Kentucky should have been able to hang in there. And like I said last week, when you play a team like Georgia, you play a team like Alabama, even on a down year, these teams just choke. And I don't know why. That's how it's always been. But
it shouldn't come as a surprise that we see this every year from Kentucky. People say, oh, Kentucky, best shot to beat Georgia, and they fall flat every time. So I don't know why we keep expecting them to do anything.
Well, speaking of Kentucky, now that we've mentioned both Missouri and Kentucky, who went into last weekend undefeated, they both got handled by Georgia and LSU respectively and fall to 5-1. So now they face each other in Lexington this weekend. this has turned into a very interesting matchup. And if you told me that at the beginning of the season that a Kentucky-Missouri game has a potential to be game of the week, one to watch, I would be shocked. And I've yet to be more torn on picking a team to win because this feels so evenly matched. What do you think, and is this game of the week potential?
I definitely think this is game of the week potential, although the one thing I'll say about this game, the Georgia passing attack versus Kentucky absolutely tore them up, and I think the Missouri passing attack is not too far behind Georgia's with Luther Burden and Brady Cook, so I think Kentucky's going to have to figure out their pass defense if they want to win this one.
They're both coming off a loss, very upset, so they're coming in with something to play for. And I think this is going to be yet another offense-heavy game, so it's going to come down to, like you said, the defense. And this is coming down to you've got the best running back on Kentucky in Ray Davis. And on the Missouri side, you've got one of the best quarterbacks in the conference in Brady Cook, throwing to Luther Burden III. So honestly, I'm stumped with this one. And we make our picks later, and not to spoil it or anything, but I think it's going to come down to home field advantage, unfortunately. That's the only way I'm able to decide between this game right now. I really don't know.
Yeah. Moving over to the SEC West, last Saturday, Alabama traveled to College Station to take on a Texas A&M team that was notorious for giving them trouble in the past. Despite this, the Tide were able to emerge with a 26-20 win. After knocking off the only other undefeated SEC West team, do you think Alabama's road to Atlanta is straight and easy paved for them at this point?
I think unless LSU can beat them in a few weeks, which is definitely possible with how dynamic their offense is led by Jaden Daniels, I think the path is sealed straight to Atlanta in December for Alabama if they beat LSU in the next few weeks. The issue with this Alabama team, though, which I do think they are still beatable, is that their wins tend to be close and ugly, and even Coach Saban says it every week. Against the Aggies, Alabama committed 14 penalties, including 9 false starts for 99 yards, and turned the ball over twice. So it's not like this is some aggressive, offense-heavy. Yes, Jalen Milroe stepped up, found his rhythm, but I don't think this is some crazy powerhouse Alabama team like we've seen in the past. So LSU has the potential. 2 weeks they play each other, I think?
I think it's week 10.
In LSU?
In Alabama.
Oh, it's in Alabama.
Yeah, it's in Tuscaloosa. Which makes it difficult for me to pick LSU in that one.
So right now, LSU is a must win for Alabama, and I think when they get that seals it for them. But still games to be played. You never know what happens. College football is crazy, and this has been one of the craziest seasons so far. So
it really has. I think for this Alabama team, that, like you say, LSU is the big stepping point for them. But as you said, Jalen Milroe took a big step up. He was 21 of 33 for 321, 3 touchdowns and a pick. The issue is the run game disappeared for Alabama in this one. They only had 23 rushing yards as a team. So I think you have to figure out a way to reconcile your run game, which had looked so good to start the season, and this new version of Jalen Milroe. If you can get both of those working together, you're going to have a really dynamic offense. So I think if they figure that out, not only the rest of the SEC, but the rest of the nation needs to be concerned about this Alabama team.
And I just want to say it's unfortunate. Obviously, they're still a great team. Their only loss came to an awesome Texas team, but it's unfortunate that these teams like Ole Miss or LSU, even Texas A&M, couldn't step up and take it from them, and I kind of think they're the ones that carved the path for them. So
oh, yeah, for sure.
I guess we're seeing Alabama and Georgia matchup back in December, unfortunately for us Auburn fans. And before we head to break, let's get to one of my favorite segments. You know what it is, SEC Teams of the Week. As you know, each week we pick a team, not necessarily who we think is the best team in the conference, but for the teams that deserve a shout out for a standout performance over the weekend. I'll start with my team of the week, and that's the number 1 Georgia Bulldogs. I'll swallow my pride and admit I was wrong in saying they're not worthy of the number 1 spot, because right now they are, and proved it with a 51-13 win over a ranked and at the time undefeated Kentucky team. Now I'm convinced they won't lose a single game in regular season, and with 4 touchdowns and 389 yards, Carson Beck has officially had his breakout performance we've all been looking for. Also, Georgia has officially broken Alabama's record for the longest streak in SEC history at number 1 on the AP poll for being there for 17 consecutive weeks. And for these reasons, Georgia is my SEC Team of the Week. Micah, who you got?
I got to go with the Bayou Bengals of LSU. Anyone who knows me knows I was all aboard the Missouri train. Missouri's taking this one. Missouri's taking this one. LSU doesn't have the defense. Well, LSU showed up and said, okay, we're going to pick off Brady Cook twice, and we're going to win this game because of the performance of our defense and because of the performance of Jaden Daniels. So I think you have to give this LSU team a lot of credit. Jaden Daniels is an amazing quarterback, and not only that, he's just an amazing athlete. He can run the ball as well, and I think any team the rest of the season is going to have trouble stopping and containing him.
Just real quick, do you think it's safe to say that Jaden Daniels is the best quarterback in the conference this season?
For sure. We knew that coming into the season, and I think he's just proven it over and over again as the season has gone on.
And quickly, before we head to break, we'll make the prediction right when we come back. But how do you see this game in Death Valley this weekend turning out? LSU against Auburn. Auburn won the last time we were there, but this is an aggressive LSU team. So how do you see that turning out for them next week?
Auburn better find a top 10 passing offense somewhere in there. That's all I've got to say.
Well, when we come back, we're making our pick for that game and the biggest games across the conference right here on Around the SEC. Welcome back to Around the SEC. Now let's make our picks for some of the biggest game this weekend. We're going to skip over the Alabama-Georgia game because there's nothing to argue. We're taking Georgia over Vandy, and we're taking Bama. So we're just going to skip right over that one, and we're going to get right into some more interesting games. And like we mentioned before the break, we've got another Tiger battle this weekend, this time in Death Valley, a night game. And we know how that atmosphere is. And we've got the Auburn Tigers traveling to take on the LSU Tigers in Baton Rouge. And the LSU Tigers come in as an 11.5-point favorite. Who is your pick? And not only that, what do you think about this spread?
So LSU is my pick easily. I think this spread is even as much as 10 points off. This could be a 3-touchdown game quite easily. Auburn has a pretty good defense, but I don't think they'll really be able to slow down Jaden Daniels. And then the Auburn offense just is not good enough to hang with this LSU team right now.
I think this is going to be the biggest blowout that Auburn's had all season, but I do think they get through this game, they take the blowout, and they come back, bounce back, and potentially win out to the Iron Bowl. I could see that potentially playing out for them, but this weekend, I think they're going to take a beat down. There's a lot of injuries on defense, and our defense has been what's carrying this Auburn team this whole season, and with injuries and just coming off a bye week, this offense is just not going to help us hang around. You've got Jaden Daniels. I'm taking the LSU Tigers. Jumping into a game in the East, we've got the Florida Gators traveling up to Columbia, South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks. This is a 2:30 primetime spot. Who do you got in this matchup?
So Florida in recent years has not played well in Columbia. Anytime they have to go there to play South Carolina usually gets the better of them, and I don't think it's going to be any different this season. Even though South Carolina is not great in the trenches, I think Spencer Rattler is good enough to carve up what's not a great Florida secondary, and I think Florida's offense might struggle to get it going a little bit in this one with the environment of Williams-Brice, so I'm going to take the Gamecocks. Like
we said last week, Florida really only won that game in Tennessee because of the swamp, and they're not playing at home this weekend. These are two extremely mediocre teams, but the Gamecocks have the better quarterback at Spencer Rattler, and for that reason and the home field advantage, I'm taking the South Carolina Gamecocks as well to win this weekend. Now, this is a game that for weeks I was not looking at, and I'll actually be in Knoxville for this game this weekend. And it's actually turned into a very interesting matchup. I think it could swing either way, but Rocky Top is a very special place. They've got crazy fans, super loud, great environment. So who are you taking with Texas A&M traveling to Knoxville to take on the Vols?
I'm taking Tennessee in this one. I think, as you say, the environment at Rocky Top is going to carry the Volunteers in this one. A&M has been honestly better than I expected this season, but I don't think it's enough to beat this Tennessee team this year.
Don't forget they're still playing with their backup quarterback, and while I think he has looked really good for a backup, I don't think it's going to be enough, and because of the home field atmosphere, I'm taking the Tennessee Volunteers as well. And this is one I think we're split on. Even though I said I've been torn on this all week, this has been the hardest one all season to pick. You've got the Missouri Tigers traveling to Lexington, Kentucky to take on the Wildcats in a 6:30 kickoff. Who do you have in this game?
Well, you say you've been conflicted all week on this one. I have not been conflicted. I really like this Missouri team still. I love this Missouri team so much. I think Kentucky's pass defense got absolutely exposed last week when Carson Beck absolutely diced them up. And if you have trouble covering Brock Bowers, you're going to have just as much trouble covering Luther Burden, who is an outstanding talent for Missouri. So I think that Brady Cook and Luther Burden are going to absolutely cook all over this Kentucky defense, and Missouri wins by at least 14.
Wow, that's a bold take right there. And don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of this Missouri team too, and I honestly want them to win. But because of the home field advantage, and they're coming off a horrendous loss to Georgia, so they've got something to prove. And for that reason, I'm taking Kentucky, but I'm not confident about it. And that is it for our picks of the week, and that is all we have for you today on Around the SEC. I'm Mikayla Kelly.
And I'm Micah Farmer.
We'll see you next week on Around the SEC.